Since my son Michael was a little boy, we've enjoyed camping trips together every year. Most of those were backcountry canoe camping trips in iconic Algonquin Provincial Park. We really loved our time paddling the Algonquin backcountry. But this year, we needed to celebrate a few milestones. Michael was now turning 18. He graduated from high school and was headed off to college in the fall. This year, we celebrated with a new adventure. A fly-in, paddle-out backcountry canoe trip in the Quetico Provincial Park Wilderness. Stick around, share the adventure with us.
Forming photographs alone.
Quetico Provincial Park is a 460,000 hectare or 1.18 million acre remote wilderness park with over 2,000 lakes and many waterfalls and trails. The park adjoins the Boundary Waters canoe area in Minnesota, USA, allowing Canadians and Americans with a love of the outdoors to span trips across the border into both countries. The park is located about 2 hours west of Thunder Bay in northwestern Ontario. From our home in Amherstburg, Ontario, getting there would mean a 1,477 kilometer road trip over 2 days, taking a shortcut through Michigan to Sault Ste. Marie. From there, we traveled north along the Trans-Canada Highway 17 through the stunning Lake Superior Provincial Park area before stopping in Terrace Bay for the night. We continued through spectacular mountain scenery along the Trans-Canada to Wilmette Canyon Provincial Park and took some time for a short hike to enjoy the magnificent views of this mini Grand Canyon. Just before Thunder Bay, we stopped in at the Terry Fox Monument and then continued on to our jumping-off point, a small town of only 2,700 people called Atikokan.
Waking up inside a dream. Future memories in the in-between.
We arrived in Atikokan in the late afternoon, with our first stop being the Souris River Canoe Company. This is where our Quetico 17 Kevlar canoe was made for us. The good folks at Souris River Canoe took us for a tour of their production facility. It was very cool to see how our canoe was made from start to finish, including hanging them like sausages, waiting for delivery to us in southwestern Ontario so many years ago.
Not afraid to fall if this is something real.
Our next stop would be our home for the night, Canoe Canada Outfitters. We enlisted the help of these fine folks to help plan our adventure, book permits, organize our float plane flight, and stay in their bunkhouse the night before our trip.
This firestone.
The bunkhouse area was pretty cool, with autographed paddles attached on the ceiling and walls reflecting on people's trips. We had a quick dinner at the Outdoorsman restaurant and then turned in for the night in anticipation of our float plane flight into the park early the next morning. We had a quick breakfast and then went over the maps en route with the outfitter before loading our gear into their shuttle for the trip to the Atikokan Water Dome seaplane base. The plane and crew were ready and waiting for us. After a quick weigh-in of our gear, they loaded the plane, strapped our canoe to the float, and we were on our way.
Right.
Under beautiful blue skies, we taxied out onto the lake with our very cool Australian pilot. Minutes later, after a smooth takeoff, we were flying over the vast expanse of the Quetico Wilderness. While you could paddle a loop of the area we were headed to, it would take much more time, and the float plane flight and view of the wilderness we were about to paddle was definitely worth the price of admission. As we neared Cache Bay, one of the southernmost areas to the US border, we could make out the ranger station that would be our landing area. A smooth landing put us right next to the dock. Even though there was a fair bit of wind, the island sheltered us nicely. After unloading our gear, the pilot wished us well, and in minutes was in the air and out of sight. We were now fully committed. After meeting with the park ranger, we loaded up the canoe and set off from the dock. We were doing a route called the Falls Chain that would take us back to Stanton Bay for pickup by the outfitter in a week. Knowing we would be hit with a crosswind once we passed the shelter of the island, we were ready to tack a bit, making our way to our first portage at Silver Falls. Portages are not signed like they are in Algonquin, but for the most part, finding the trailheads weren't too difficult. Silver Falls was a fairly rugged 700-meter portage into Saganogans Lake. From there, our next portage, called Dead Man's Portage, was a bit easier and only 290 meters. After a quick shore lunch, we continued on and found a nice campsite to spend our first night in the park. Campsites here are also not signed like they are in Algonquin. This is a wilderness park, so finding suitable campsites can be a bit more challenging with an often rocky and overgrown shoreline. Tonight's dinner was sausages, rice, and vegetables bought from the grocery store in Atikokan, which cost more than my car. It was time to hang the food barrel and get some sleep. We have more portages and waterfalls to enjoy tomorrow. As usual, we always sleep better in the tent. What a beautiful morning. Breakfast was bagels and coffee. After enjoying every last minute of our first morning in the park, we packed up camp, but we had some number 2 business to tackle before hitting the water. If you're used to the Algonquin Thunderbox, you won't find that in this wilderness park. Dig a hole, bury your poop, and pack out your paper. We loaded the canoe and pushed off into the water, paddling down the falls chain. Today we would see many amazing waterfalls, including Four Falls, Bald Rock Falls, Little Falls, Cocoa Falls, Canyon Falls, and Cannabis Falls. Of course, with all of these falls come portages, which were relatively short, but some were rugged. We had lunch at the Bald Head Falls Portage, which was a large, rounded, smooth rock. Perfect lunch spot with even enough time for a short nap before filtering some water and back to paddling. Our second last portage before Kenny Lake was extremely rugged. But to make matters worse, as we were finishing up our carry, we could see a strong thunderstorm coming towards us in the distance. We could see the wall of water coming towards us quickly.
Looks like it's going that way.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get it though.
We're gonna get it, but not as bad.
Yeah, we shouldn't be out on the water though. I think we should wait it out. We could put the canoe upside down on a rock and have the little shelter at least.
Flipping the canoe upside down on a rock cliff gave us some headroom, and some packs worked as wind block to keep the worst of it off of us so we could dig out our rain gear. When the storm dissipated a bit, we climbed out of our shelter and were eager to get some paddle miles down in case more bad weather was coming. We found a nice campsite on Quetico Lake just in time as another storm looked to be brewing in our direction. We set up the tent quickly, just in case, but the skies cleared up a bit. Michael managed to get a nice fire going, even with the wet wood. Dinner was sausages with veggies and instant mashed potatoes. Without refrigeration, this would be the last of our fresh food. We'd be eating freeze-dried meals going forward. After dinner, it started to rain lightly, so we hung the food barrel and climbed into the tent for the night. It was time to regenerate some energy for another tough day tomorrow. After another good night's sleep, along with some bagels, oatmeal, and coffee for breakfast, we were ready to go, but the weather had other plans. The wind was howling, so we decided to relax at camp a bit longer. We had a second cup of coffee and took advantage of the wind to dry out our gear some more from yesterday's rain. The wind was getting stronger. After lunch, we decided we would give it a go. We loaded up the canoe and paddled hard into the angry waves. We used the leeward side of islands and sheltered bays to borrow some calm water as much as possible. Up ahead we could see large unprotected area and were pretty concerned. We decided to take refuge on the last small island before the open area. We paddled around to the protected side and unloaded the canoe. This was a pretty small island, and the wind rifled through the trees, bending them with lots of creaking and moaning. There was a small level area in the middle that would fit our tent if we were forced to hunker down for the night. We used our packs as windbreaks and took advantage of the time to relax, read books, and some video game time for Michael while we waited out the wind. After eating dinner, we decided to give it a shot. The wind had died down a bit, and we were full of energy to paddle as many miles as we could with the daylight we had left. We hit the water, paddled hard towards some areas we thought would have campsites as daylight began to dwindle. After about 3 hours of paddling, we eventually found a great little cliff site near the petroglyphs. It seemed a bit cramped, but we had an amazing view overlooking the lake. With the wind now calm, we enjoyed a beautiful evening as the sun set over the lake. After a toast of whiskey to the wilderness gods for safe passage, we relaxed fireside watching shooting stars rocket across the heavens. Nothing but silence, with the occasional cry of loons echoing across the lake. It started getting a bit cold, so we retired to the tent for the evening. Not long after we turned in, I woke to wolves howling. They were so close. At that moment, I was thankful that we were on an island campsite and that wolf packs generally don't swim long distances to small islands, I think. At one point, I could hear fighting among them with growling and whimpering. That was truly an amazing experience. When I woke, the wolves were still at it, but sounded much further away. We enjoyed a visit from a bald eagle at breakfast and took some time for a second cup of coffee to enjoy this amazing view. We packed up camp and paddled off in search of petroglyphs, which are carvings that are ground into cliff walls and boulders by First Nations people many years ago. We had a rough idea of where they were, but had no luck in finding them. Since we were behind from yesterday's wind, we didn't have time to keep looking and decided to press on. Word of advice: when planning a wilderness trip like this, add extra time to your trip to help absorb delays so you don't have to rush. Slow down and enjoy this amazing place. Lucky for us, the wind began to blow a bit from behind, so we took the opportunity to get out the sail and have a nice relaxing sail across the lake. Unfortunately, the Poets Chain portion of our route was charred due to a recent forest fire. It just felt sad and depressing to paddle through those areas. With the wind picking up, we found an island campsite where the tent area and fire pit were a bit deeper into the forest. This cut down on the winds off the lake, which made for a nice evening. After hanging the food barrel, we enjoyed another great campfire and star-filled sky. The temperatures have been warm and comfortable, even for late August this far north.
I can see you in the meadow, holding out your hand.
I woke to the sound of a few raindrops on the tent fly, but that ended fairly quickly. After a nice relaxed breakfast, we packed up and hit the water. When we arrived at one of our portages, we decided to stop for a quick snack before making the carry. We met a nice American couple just finishing their portage. We chatted briefly, as they were the first humans we've seen since we left the ranger station. After the slightly rugged portage, we paddled through Queitco Lake towards Chatterton Falls. The portage was fairly decent, and when we arrived on the other side, we were delighted to find a beautiful sandy beach. This was a perfect spot to cool off and have a nice lunch. I could have stayed there the whole day. Eventually it was time to go, so we loaded up and paddled towards Russell Rapids, which was really just a lazy river swift pushing us along towards Sturgeon Lake. Sturgeon Lake is a long north-south lake, and after being windbound a couple of days ago, we were concerned about the challenges we might face. The winds turned out to be light, and we enjoyed an easy paddle covering the entire length in only an hour and a half. Found a beautiful, huge cliff-top campsite at the north end with a commanding view of the lake. This would be our favorite campsite for the trip so far. There were different flat rock levels and a gorgeous view of the lake. We got a fire going and enjoyed the sunset, relaxing next to the warm fire until we began to nod off. What a great spot this would be for a cabin. Give me the simple life. No internet, phones, people, or drama that comes with all of it. Just the simple life.
Will never be the same. Child, innocent as starlight.
We really didn't want to leave this campsite, so after a lazy breakfast and 3 cups of coffee later, we hit the water for our last full day of paddling towards Pickerel Lake. The portages today were less rugged and easier, even though they were about 550 meters to about 750 meters. We stopped at the end of a portage for our only hot lunch of the trip. Michael made some freeze-dried pad thai, which was delicious. It's amazing what a hot lunch will do for your spirits. We had heard from the outfitter that Deux Rivières may be a challenge in low water times, so we were prepared, and yes, it did live up to its reputation. Finding the mouth of the river among the tall grass was our biggest obstacle. Luckily, our Garmin InReach GPS map helped us to find it as we pushed our canoe through deep mud as the river snaked along. This is waist-deep kind of mud. You definitely don't want to get out of your canoe in. After an exhausting slog, we finally made it to the first beaver dam, and after dragging over the dam, the water level got slightly higher. We continued on to the next beaver dam, after where the water level rose again. By the time we got to the third beaver dam, we were back to comfortable water depth for paddling. The best way to describe this river is a grassy, muddy maze. We weren't expecting a headwind and rough water in the last of the Twin Lakes, but even when tacking, the wind was always in our faces. Under overcast skies, we eventually found another sandy beach at the Portage trailhead. There was an old iron mechanical part on the beach in the water. I have no idea what it could be, but it looked pretty old. We enjoyed watching a couple pairs of swans swimming in Dory Lake, always traveling in twos. These are such beautiful animals.
Tales washed away in waves.
We had a long paddle across much of Pickerel Lake to get to our final campsite of the trip. Since the winds had calmed considerably, we cut across the lake and found a nice campsite on an island near the mouth of Stanton Bay, where we would be picked up by the outfitter shuttle in the morning.
Freedom of my mind. Thoughts lost
We set up
in
camp,
a flower.
made a nice fire, and relaxed with the last of the whiskey to celebrate a wonderful trip. A woodpecker was working hard on the tree behind us, while Michael made the last of the s'mores.
Beautiful in power.
It was a beautiful evening, and we enjoyed every bit of our last night at camp. I love the sound of raindrops on the tent fly. Our final morning in Quetico would have us wake up to rain, but we were okay with that. It did ease up just long enough for us to make breakfast and pack a few things before starting up again. With our shuttle pickup scheduled for 11 a.m., we had time to relax and enjoy a second cup of coffee, having eaten nearly all the food we packed. We often packed way too much food, but this time planned it perfectly. We put on our rain gear and loaded up the canoe for a leisurely paddle through calm water dotted with raindrops on our way to Stanton Bay. We watched for moose in the grassy area at the mouth of the bay. We didn't see any. We did see more loons, ducks, and swans. It was nice to just drift here and there, enjoying the quiet, solitude, sound of raindrops in the water, reflecting on what we've just experienced this past week. The final chapter of our trip would be a 450-meter carry from the shore to the parking area. A short time later, the outfitter arrived with cold beer to shuttle us back to town, where we enjoyed a warm shower, clean dry clothes, and a great lunch at Chips R Us, which included cold root beer. We loaded up our canoe and gear on the SUV and started the long drive home with another night's stay in Terrace Bay at the Red Dog Inn. We left at 5 a.m. the next morning, traveling through the picturesque Lake Superior country we enjoyed so much coming up. Another quick and easy border crossing back into Canada at the Windsor Ambassador Bridge, and we were home shortly afterwards. Exhausted, but so grateful to have been able to do a trip like this together. I could give lots of advice about this trip to those thinking about doing it, but I'll keep it short. Don't wait. Do it now. No one is guaranteed tomorrow.